I want to start by saying, I am not someone who believes in the supernatural. I'm a civil engineer. I work with numbers, measurements, and facts. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in monsters. I have never, not once in my 34 years of life, thought that something unexplainable could exist in this world. I say all of this because what I'm about to tell you changed that. And I need you to understand, I'm not telling this story for attention. I'm not telling it to entertain you. I'm telling it because I genuinely don't know what I saw out there. And after 3 years of trying to explain it, of going back and forth with myself, of losing sleep, of sitting in parking lots at night because I'm too afraid to walk to my own front door alone, I need to say it out loud. So, here it is. It was October of 2021. My 2 friends, I'll call them Daniel and Marcus, had been planning a camping trip to the Appalachian Forest in North Carolina for almost 6 months. We'd done camping trips before. Nothing extreme. Car camping, mostly. Fire pit, coolers full of beer, sleeping bags. The usual guys' weekend stuff. But this time, Daniel wanted to do something different. He'd found this trail, a lesser-known one, about 14 miles off the main highway, that apparently had a beautiful lake at the end of it. He said a friend of a friend had hiked it and that the campsite by the lake was completely secluded. No other hikers. No noise. Just trees, water, and sky. It sounded perfect. We drove out on a Friday evening. The plan was to hike in Saturday morning, spend Saturday and Sunday night at the lake, and hike back out Monday. 4 days total. The drive itself was already a little unsettling, and I remember thinking that at the time, though I brushed it off. The further we got from the main road, the narrower the highway became. 2 lanes turned into one. Streetlights disappeared. The trees on either side of the road got so tall and so close together that our headlights barely lit anything beyond 15 feet ahead. Marcus made a joke about it, said it felt like the trees were leaning in to listen to our conversation. We laughed. We shouldn't have. We got to the trailhead parking lot around 9 that night. There were no other cars. Not one. We'd expected at least a few, maybe some other weekend hikers, but the lot was empty. Just a wooden sign with a faded map, a rusted metal garbage can chained to a post, and darkness beyond the tree line. We set up in the back of Daniel's truck that night, deciding to start the hike fresh in the morning. I remember lying there, looking up at the stars through the truck window, feeling genuinely at peace. The air was cold and clean. The forest was quiet. Almost too quiet. No crickets. No frogs. No wind in the leaves. Just silence. I told myself it was because of the altitude, or the season, or whatever logical explanation my brain could grab onto. I pulled my sleeping bag up and closed my eyes. At some point during the night, I don't know what time, I woke up. I don't know what woke me. There was no sound, no movement. I just opened my eyes and was suddenly, completely awake. The kind of awake where every nerve in your body is telling you to pay attention. I lay still for a moment, listening. Nothing. I turned my head slowly and looked out the truck window into the tree line. It was dark, really dark, but there was enough moonlight to see the first few feet of forest. And that's when I saw it. Standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 30 feet from the truck, was a shape. Tall. Thin. Too thin. The kind of thin where your brain takes a second to process what it's looking at because it doesn't match anything stored in your memory. Its arms hung low, lower than they should, and its head was slightly tilted, the way a dog tilts its head when it hears a strange sound. It was just standing there, looking at the truck. My heart stopped. I mean that, it felt like my heart physically stopped beating for 2 or 3 full seconds, and then slammed back into rhythm so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told myself it was a deer. A tall, weird-looking deer. I told myself it was a tree stump with an unusual shape. I told myself my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark. But then it moved. Not toward the truck. Not away from it. It just shifted its weight. Slowly. From one side to the other. The way a person does when they've been standing in one place too long. And I realized, with a cold, crawling certainty, that whatever was standing at that tree line was watching us. I didn't scream. I didn't wake the others. I did the only thing my frozen body would let me do. I pulled my sleeping bag over my face and lay completely still, barely breathing, until I fell into a fitful, dreamless sleep. When I woke up in the morning, the tree line was empty. Sunlight filled the truck. Daniel was already outside making coffee on his camp stove, and Marcus was laughing at something on his phone. I almost told them right then. I had the words ready. But in the daylight, with the coffee smell and the birds finally singing and Marcus complaining about sleeping with a boot in his back, it felt crazy. It felt like exactly the kind of thing that sounds completely reasonable in the dark and completely ridiculous in the light. So I said nothing. I should have said something. We started the hike at about 8 in the morning. The trail was beautiful, genuinely. I want to be honest about that. Tall red and orange trees on either side, a soft carpet of fallen leaves underfoot, the occasional burst of sunlight through the canopy. If you're someone who loves the outdoors, this was exactly what you came for. For the first hour or two, everything was fine. We talked, we laughed, we stopped to photograph the scenery. I felt the unease from the night before slowly dissolving with every step. But around the 3rd mile, Daniel stopped. He was at the front of the group, and he just stopped walking. Marcus and I nearly walked into him. "What?" Marcus said. Daniel didn't answer right away. He was staring at something off the trail, to the left, in the trees. I followed his gaze. There, tied to a branch about 5 feet off the ground, was an animal. A deer, or what had been a deer. It was hung upside down by its hind legs, strung between 2 trees with what looked like paracord. It had been gutted. Completely cleaned out. But here's the part that made my stomach drop. It hadn't been skinned. Its eyes were still open. And it was fresh. The blood on the leaves below it was still dark and wet. "Hunters," Marcus said immediately, in that confident tone he uses when he wants to close a conversation. "Hunters don't leave a whole carcass in the middle of a trail," Daniel said quietly. We stood there for a long moment. Nobody moved. The forest around us was doing that thing again, that wrong silence. No birds. No wind. Nothing. Daniel finally looked at both of us and said, "We keep moving." So we did. But I noticed, and I didn't say anything, that after that, Daniel picked up the pace. He wasn't walking casually anymore. He was moving with purpose, like he wanted to get to the campsite and stop being on that trail. And I started watching the trees. That's the thing about forests, when you stop looking at the path and start looking into the trees, they change. The depth of them. The shadows inside them. You start noticing spaces between the trunks that look almost like corridors. Long, dark corridors that seem to go back forever. And you can't help but feel, in some primitive, animal part of your brain, that something could be watching you from inside those corridors, and you would never know. I kept seeing movement in my peripheral vision. Shadows shifting. Something dark between the trees, there for a half second and then gone. I kept telling myself it was squirrels, birds, light playing through leaves. At mile 7, we reached the lake. I have to be honest, the lake was stunning. It sat in a natural clearing, perfectly still, reflecting the orange and red of the autumn trees like a mirror. A flat, grassy bank along one side made a natural campsite. Nobody else was there. It was exactly what Daniel had promised. We set up camp, built a fire, ate dinner as the sun went down and the sky turned that incredible dark blue that you only really see when you're far from city lights. For a few hours, everything felt normal again. Better than normal. The beer was cold, the fire was warm, the stars were incredible. Around 10 o'clock, Marcus went to bed. He was always the first to sleep on camping trips, said the fresh air knocked him out. Daniel and I stayed up by the fire, talking about nothing in particular. Work stuff. Old memories. Comfortable, easy conversation. It was maybe 11:30 when Daniel went quiet mid-sentence. I looked at him. He was staring at the tree line on the far side of the lake. "What?" I said. "Do you see that?" I looked across the lake. The far bank was maybe 150 feet away. In the darkness, I could make out the shapes of trees, their reflections broken up in the water's slight movement. And then I saw what he was looking at. On the far bank, at the very edge of the trees, there was a light. Soft, yellowish. It moved slowly, not like a flashlight moving in someone's hand, but more like a candle. Drifting. Steady but unhurried, moving along the tree line from left to right. "Hiker," I said. "At midnight," Daniel said. We watched it move for maybe 30 seconds. Then it stopped. And for one long, awful moment, it just stayed there, across the lake, at the tree line, completely still. And then it went out. Not out like a flashlight being switched off. Out like a flame being pinched. A soft, quiet extinguishing. "We should put the fire out," Daniel said. "Why?" He looked at me. "Because whatever that is, I don't want it to be able to see us." We put the fire out. We sat in the dark for a long time, not speaking. The forest was absolutely silent. I kept my eyes on the far bank, watching for movement, watching for the light to come back. It didn't. After about an hour, Daniel said he was going to sleep. I told him I'd stay up a little longer. He gave me a look, the kind that said, "Are you sure?" And I nodded. What I didn't tell him was that I couldn't have slept if I tried. I sat alone by the dead fire for maybe another 40 minutes. Nothing happened. The lake was still. The tree line on the far bank stayed dark and empty. I started to feel the exhaustion of the hike pulling at me, and my fear slowly, began to give way to tiredness. I was just starting to think about getting into my tent when I heard it. A sound from the forest behind our campsite. Not in front, not from the far bank where we'd seen the light, but from directly behind me. It was a sound I can only describe as wrong. Not a footstep, exactly. Not a branch breaking. It was more like the sound of something very large moving through the forest, but moving carefully, deliberately. The sound of something that knew how to be quiet but had gotten, in that one moment, slightly careless. I did not turn around. Every single survival instinct in my body told me, do not turn around. Do not acknowledge it. If it doesn't know you've heard it, maybe it will pass. I sat completely still. My hands were gripping my knees so hard my knuckles had gone white. I stared straight ahead at the lake, at the still black water, and I breathed, slowly, quietly, through my nose. The sound stopped. Silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. 5 seconds. 10. And then, from somewhere to my left, maybe 20 feet away, at the very edge of where our camp met the tree line, came a sound that I have never, in 3 years, been able to get out of my head. It was a breath. Not an animal breath. Not the short, snuffling breath of a deer or a bear. A long, slow, measured breath. The kind of breath a person takes when they're trying to calm themselves down, or when they're savoring something. And with it came a smell. Thick and sweet and wrong, like something trying to smell like flowers, but underneath it was something rotting. I stood up. I don't know how I did it. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely feel them. But some part of my brain, the part that was still capable of rational thought, told me, get in the tent. Get in the tent right now. Don't run. Don't make noise. Just get in the tent. I walked to my tent. Unzipped it. Got inside. Zipped it closed. I lay there, rigid, for what felt like hours. And then, just once, just one single time, something pressed against the outside of my tent. Not hard. Not aggressive. Just a pressure. Against the side wall, near my head. Like a hand pressing lightly against fabric. Testing it. I did not move. I did not scream. I did not breathe. After a moment, the pressure was gone. I lay awake until the sky outside the tent went from black to grey to pale blue. And when full daylight had come and I could hear birds singing again, I got up, woke Daniel and Marcus, and told them we were leaving. I didn't tell them why. I just said I wasn't feeling well. We packed up camp and hiked back out in about 4 hours. I walked in the middle of the group the entire way. I didn't look into the trees. I didn't look at any shadows. I stared at the trail directly in front of my feet and I kept moving. We got back to the truck. We drove home. I never told Daniel or Marcus what had happened. Not until about 6 months later, when I called Daniel one night, I don't even know why, I just needed to say it out loud to someone, and told him everything. The shape at the tree line on the first night. The breathing. The pressure on the tent. There was a long silence on the line. And then Daniel said, quietly, carefully, I saw something on the far bank that night. After I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I was looking through the mesh of my tent at the lake, and on the far bank, there was something standing at the water's edge. I asked him what it looked like. Tall, he said. Too tall. And it was just standing there, looking at our camp. How long? I asked. I don't know, he said. I closed my eyes and just kept telling myself it wasn't real. When I looked again, it was gone. We didn't say anything for a while after that. Then I asked him, do you think it was a person? And Daniel, logical, practical, no-nonsense Daniel, who I have known for 15 years, said, no. I've looked into it since then. Spent a lot of late nights going down rabbit holes online, Appalachian folklore, reports of strange encounters on hiking trails, descriptions of things people have seen in forests that they can't explain. I'm not going to tell you what I think it was. That's not really the point. The point is this. There are places in this world where the comfortable logic of everyday life gets thin, where the certainty you walk around with, the certainty that you understand what's real and what isn't, what's possible and what isn't, starts to feel a little fragile. The Appalachian forest is one of those places. I still go camping. I go with my wife now, and we stick to campgrounds with other people nearby. I still love the outdoors. I still love the smell of trees and cold air and wood smoke. But I never go back to that trail. And I never, not once, leave the tent alone after dark. If you've had an experience like this, something you saw in the woods that you still can't explain, I want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments. And if you're watching this at night, maybe check that your door is locked. Good night.